You are back once again on the Virtually Agile podcast. I'm Chris Stone, the Virtual Agile Coach, and today virtual meets visual as I'm joined by the Visual Agile Coach, someone who leverages the power of visuals to improve communication, engagement, and the delivery of value. Welcome to the show today, Olina. How are things in your world?
Thanks, Chris. I'm pretty good. I've just started to get into this vacation mode right now, so I'm relaxing, tidying up my backlog and just getting into my vacation mode, basically.
Amazing. Now, Olina, just who and what is the Visual Agile Coach?
The visual learner coach is basically when I started out working with Agile, I was a project manager for many years, and then I entered the Agile world, and I started to experiment with combining visual practices with Agile ways of working, and it worked pretty well. So a couple of years ago, I formed something that I called the Visual Learner Coach, and I'm still developing the concept.
Okay, and you're a believer in the power of visuals in the workplace. What do you believe the benefits are in using them?
Well, I sure am. Well, I totally can see the effect when we use visuals in different contexts. So, for instance, when we are having a remote meeting, or when we're doing a planning together, or we're doing a workshop, or anything like that, I certainly see the effect and the energy that visuals can help with. It certainly shapes a better environment for collaboration and clarifying things, clarifying information, and really getting people on board and getting people engaged.
I definitely agree with you, particularly on the engagement side of things. You're probably very aware the sorts of visuals I use are largely or have largely been in the retrospective space,
Mm.
and just the impact they've had on energizing people, in connecting people to the subject matter, but also getting them thinking a little bit differently, engaging different parts of their brain to unlock potentially solutions to old problems that they haven't been able to surface before.
Exactly. Yeah, something happens when they get something to look at instead of just getting a bunch of bullet points or just hearing someone talking. You certainly see people connect to another side of their brain, obviously, and get more prone to interact and speak their minds, and they get a whole other level of engagement, basically.
They really do. Do you have a particularly favorite visual you've created, or which of yours has been the most popular?
Of the ones that I put out on LinkedIn, I think the yellow one, I think you posted that one as well, that describes the future workplace or the future ways of working, basically. That one was really popular. But also, I see people really appreciate when they get a visual of a process or something describing, for instance, the Scrum framework or something like that. People really appreciate getting visuals for that kind of thing because it's a kind of abstract. So when people are able to view a process or a step by step visual for something, they really appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely believe it helps with knowledge retention in particular. I recall first encountering the House of Lean,
Hmm.
early on in my agile journey, and I remember the original version of that was basically like this just black and white photo of a pillar esque Greek style architecture, and
Yeah.
it just had obviously it had House of Lean, and it had all of the pillars. But it
Hmm.
was it was kind of it was written sideways. You had to turn your head like this to be able to
Yes.
understand it, and it never really resonated with me in the way that the one that you've shared has.
Hmm.
And obviously, you've done yours, and it looks more like a physical house, something that people relate
Hmm.
to a bit more. Because when you see that other visual, who lives in one of those old Greek architecture style buildings where it looks like an actual house and it's got like the roof and all the other places, and it's just written in a different way and produced in a different way. And that one was far more memorable for me,
Mm.
particularly as the information was displayed in an easily read format versus
Yeah.
having to turn this, you know.
Exactly, exactly. And on top of that, I think you're English speaking, obviously, it's your mother tongue. But for others who need to study that kind of thing, so for instance, when I did all those exams that you're talking about, SAFE and whatnot, and you encountered that sort of visual, it was really, first of all, uh, reading it like that, like you said, and then interpreting the language is another barrier. So I felt it was even that is even another impediment for me to learn that. So I really need a visual to accompany the word, uh, as I need to translate that to my own language as well.
I think we've just touched upon another really powerful point around the use of visuals in that using visuals, a bit like music, it transcends language and culture. So, regardless of where you're from, you can see a picture
Mm.
and an image, and it might be more easily understood than if you just saw the words. So many people will be familiar with, if they see a tree, they know that's, I can see an image of a tree. It's far more concrete than the word tree. So using visuals like this can help you with learning new topics, new techniques,
Yeah,
retaining that information, and then probably even drawing connections between that information and your own context.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And on we have I have another really cool example. I think the world champion in memory is a Swedish guy, and I remember reading his book a couple of years ago. And his best tip was actually adding a symbol to each chapter when you had to memorize, for instance, a process or well, anything basically. And that was his way of or his system basically, how he remembers stuff. And he remembered like 1,000 digits or whatever he remembered. I don't know, but he attached a symbol to each thing or each section, and that's how he saw that in his memory later on.
Yeah, there's famous memory techniques such
Mm.
as the memory palace, where
Yeah.
you practice storing information in different rooms of a house, and you imagine yourself physically walking through this house, turning left perhaps into this room,
Yeah.
and that might be the room with this category of information. Then you go up the
Mm.
stairs into the attic, and that's where this information is stored. And the act of physically locating it into places that you can really visualize
Mm.
drastically helps with memory retention.
Yeah. Really great tip.
Fascinating techniques. There's also a huge misconception out there about
Mm.
people's ability to draw. Many people
Mm.
believe they can't do it, or they write themselves off. They have this limiting belief before they've even gotten started. And I
Yeah.
obviously was in a workshop of yours
Mhm.
back in March in Finland, where you were teaching people how to do this. That regardless of their ability, they
Mm.
can draw.
Yeah.
So, for any of our listeners who perhaps have those same limiting beliefs, what advice do you have for them to get started with creating their own visuals?
Well, there's several. So I think I read a study saying that something happens to, because if you ask the same question in the first grade class, everyone raises their hand. Everyone can draw, obviously, if you ask a kid. But then something happens in the age of, I think it was 8 or 9 or so, where we suddenly get um, more prone to consider other people's opinions about stuff. So we get more um, conscious about that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that stays on. So we get stuck with that, that worry about getting judged or whatever that is. And most people still carry that on into adult life. And I often say, just first of all, it doesn't when you're drawing to convey a message or getting something across to the other person. It doesn't have to be art, right? And most people can actually draw a straw man. And if they can't draw a straw man, everyone can draw a circle and they can draw lines and they can draw basic figures. And if you can write letters, you certainly know how to draw a box. You certainly know how to draw a circle and so on. And you build on that. It's just getting over that incredible harsh inner voice telling you something you shouldn't listen to, really.
It's the burden of knowledge and experience and the world you faced around you. It's a bit like when it comes to creativity, children are some of the most creative people there are because they are unhampered by previous experiences, by the perceptions of the world of what can and can't be, and they will
Mm,
just create things with reckless abandon. They don't care. They just go off into their own little world and create things.
yeah.
And as you say, as you get older, you start to learn. Well, I've tried that before and it didn't work,
Mm,
or I was judged for sharing that idea in the past, so I won't do that again. Or that's improper to share about that, so I
mm,
won't do that. Or otherwise, there's lots of these little things that tell us don't
yeah.
do that. And I
Mm,
think the same is true of drawing. You used to be able to do in the past, and over time that ability erodes. But also, I guess practice. If you don't
mm,
practice very often, you're not going to be as confident with something. If you stop speaking a
exactly.
language for a few years, you're going to be a bit rusty and be like, oh, should I say that? Am I
Yeah,
ready?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So just go ahead and practice. And strawman is just perfectly fine, you know? Strawman and speech
So
bubbles will go a long way.
So straw man, speech bubbles. Are there any other, I guess, techniques or resources you can point people towards to help them get started?
I mean, if you want to develop your ability to draw like more art, more perfectly, so to speak, in more detailed way, obviously sketchnoting is a great way to get into the subject. Otherwise, um, otherwise, just trying to capture a meeting or even try to start write letters. Drawing letters is a good start as well, because obviously you can write. So turning letters into uh, different, you know, different types of looks and feel. You know, drawing fat letters, drawing narrow ones, drawing, you know, in whatever way you feel like. That's a good way to start as well.
Images resonate with me so much. I long for the day, Olina, when there's a bit of AI out there that can basically just transcribe any meeting that I'm part of and turn it into a bit of
Yeah.
a visual story for me in seconds. And I could just look at that and go, yep, that's what happened in that meeting, rather than just being a huge wall of words that immediately makes me think, I don't want to read that.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's not too far away.
Potentially so. Now, what's your favourite story relating to the use of visuals in the workplace? Have you got examples that you can share of how visuals have perhaps significantly improved something for those that you've worked with?
Yeah. So my favorite example is of the company Rouge Pharmaceuticals. They did a visual version of their strategy, and prior to having that in place, I think the number of was it like 46% of the employees understood that vision and that strategy. And after implementing that visual, the same thing, the percentage was up above 90%. 90% of everyone understood what they were talking about and what the vision was all about, and about 84% of everyone even understood how their daily job aligned to that. So I think in particular, visions are often like fluffy words, a lot of buzzwords maybe, and a lot of values and so on. And if you're able to visualize that, that can be really powerful to align people behind. So that is a good example of how that was successfully implemented. Um, Otherwise, I really like story mapping. So that is when I come to a company, I often look for that sort of thing. Like, have they mapped out somewhere in here a story, like a story map that really tells me like how their product is planned to roll out, or how it works, or what they're working on right now, and so on. So I'd said story mapping is a really cool thing. Love that.
Nice. I like the previous example was actually very powerful, like almost a 40 to 50% increase
Yeah,
in someone's ability to understand something as important as a strategy.
exactly.
What a result.
Yeah.
I've been thinking for a while that we certainly need more of these sorts of things.
Mm,
Imagine large groups of people coming together on this big multi-million pound project,
mm,
and what commonly will happen is, you know, a massive document is written up defining exactly what that project is and what the scope of it is, and
mm,
there's lots of commercials involved, etc., etc. And then a bunch of third parties are gathered together into a team and said, right, this is what we're trying to achieve.
mm.
And ultimately, it is just a huge wall of text with lots of
Yeah,
things to remember,
yeah.
and then you go off into your day-to-day work and remembering exactly the details of that and the nuance involved.
Mm,
There's got to be a better way of turning those sorts of documents into
mm.
something more visual.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. I'm instantly thinking on graphic recording to capture that sort of, because what you're describing sounds to me like when you have like when you run like a really cool kickoff to start off something really big, or you have a workshop to explore something together, and then you have a really good time, and everyone is really engaged and so on, and then a couple of weeks after, we're like, what did we really agree on? But having someone to capture that visually is really so cool, which is called graphic recording. Um, and that is something that is really big in Germany. I think we're starting to pick up here, northern of Europe, but I wish that that could be more common. I think it will be in the future.
I hope so. As someone who is a huge believer in visual thinking, who find it
Mm.
particularly resonates with my own learning style and my ability to retain knowledge, I look forward to the day when it's just part and parcel of how we do things.
Yeah.
So who else out there, Olina, should we be aware of in the visual thinking space? Is there any other people that you can point others towards if they want to learn from or hear about some great visual
Oh,
thinkers?
there's so many. Obviously, I would pick my newfound friend Excel Van Keel. I think her name is Van Keel. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but the founder of Joyfy. I met with her a month ago down in Belgium to just discuss potential projects together and so on. And she's even written a book that's really really good. I really recommend that one. And then we have Todd Churches from the States who wrote Visual Leadership. He's also really a cool guy that you could follow on LinkedIn. He's really, that book is amazing as well. And then for beginners, I would say check out, what is his name? Doug Neal on YouTube. He has something called Verbal to Visual, which is a really, really good. That's how I got hooked, really, watching his stuff.
Verbal to visual. What was your first drawing and how is it compared to how they turn out today?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I found just the other day, I found an old notebook with really my first sketches, and I thought that was so good. And obviously you develop as you go, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So certainly a lot has happened for me as well. And it's funny when people ask you like how did you find your style, or how did you go about to learn this or that and so on. And I still find my visuals quite simplistic. I use a lot of color and so on because I like them to pop, but I'm still quite simplistic in my drawing. So I haven't gone on searched for a specific style. I just started out, and that seems to be the way I draw stuff. Um, yeah. it really, but I mean, I learn new stuff all the time. So it continues to build out my visual library and so on, and the usage of color and we'll see how what my style will look like in 5 years. I have no idea.
You've touched on a really interesting concept there in your visual library. I liken this to what I call my facilitation toolbox. And my facilitation toolbox is all of the things that I have at my disposal that I could use, could employ to help the teams and companies I work with. And the one I choose is often co created with those involved, but has come from years and years of practice, from getting inspiration from others, from trialing and failing and erroring and updating and otherwise.
Yeah.
And the notion of a visual library is really interesting. So tell me more about your visual library and how it's developed.
So I went on a training a couple of years ago, and that's where I really started to understand what we mean about visual library, really, because I wasn't really familiar what we meant when we say that. But obviously, when we say visual library, we're talking about icons, basically. How what is the one icon you can pick out from your own head or library when you're talking about security? Well, a lock, obviously, or I don't know, something
A
like that.
shield.
Yeah, brilliant. So that's really what it is, and that's where I started to explore, and I set out to try to find what kind of icons I needed, because I worked in the software development industry, and needed a lot of icons for data, which can be a little bit, well, abstract maybe. So that's how I started to build my first ones, and then I've noticed that I'm continuously picking up. I watch a lot of obviously I follow a lot of other visual communicators out there, and I pick up one thing, and maybe that guy uses a cloud to visualize data. Well, that's brilliant. I add it to mine, and I just continuously fill my own library with inspiration from others, and then I do them my own style and maybe develop them and so on. Um, so yeah, basically finding inspiration from others.
Very nice. I'd love to hear about your process. So let's explore a scenario. You've decided you've got a visual that you want to create. It's
Mm.
a process in the agile world. You've decided I
Hmm.
really want to bring to life with visuals
Mm.
the concept of a scrum of scrums, hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
Now, how how would you get started, and what's your process for turning that concept into something
Mm.
visual that you would then share with others?
If I'm visualizing a process, I would really start sketching that out before, because obviously you might want to shift around stuff and change that and swap this for another thing and so on. So I would start out just drawing with pen and paper and using post-its. So first of all, take a piece of paper, and then I take my first post-it, and then I do notes, as they say, like steps, and then I just place post-its out like that, and like quickly sketch the process out, and then I might swap around things, or maybe I come to the conclusion that I really don't need this step, or here I need to clarify this part and that, and so on. And when I'm happy with that sketch, I'll go to my iPad and just draft it out there.
So you start analog, quite physical, with pens and paper, and then you transition that into the digital space.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm doing a process, that is how I would go about, because the chances are that you want to swap things and you want to change order, or you find that, hey, this is not really super clear. You might want to change stuff and so on. So that is obviously the easiest way to go about.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Now, I'm keen to hear what do you think is the area of the agile space that could do with the most visual thinking? What needs a bit of energizing, a bit more creativity, something different being done with it?
Well, recently I've experimented as far as I've been able to in PI planning. I've been having a lot of PI plannings remotely with a lot of people, and getting everyone, a large number of people on the same page, can be quite tricky. So using Miro or whatever is out there to create a shared space with a lot of visual information has been something that I've tried a lot. Um, but I do see a lack of roadmaps. Like people tend to do Gantt charts and do like roadmaps in Jira, which is just incredibly boring. So just like quite rough sketches of a roadmap is really, really helpful, especially when communicating with other people, stakeholders, or people outside your organization. That's really, really something that I'd like to see more of. I think that would be incredibly useful.
What I'd love to see more of in that specific area is you see a lot of roadmaps, or you see a lot of communications about roadmaps where they say, "Oh, we're going to release version one point something of a product or a feature." Right? But what the
Yeah.
hell does that mean to a customer,
Mm,
right? That doesn't make sense. What's going to be
mm,
in that? So can
mm,
you include some sort of visual representation of what that customer is going to gain from that release, so that you
mm.
can easily see that on a roadmap? And you might be able to see, right, we're going to see that in, I don't know, November this year, we're going to get something that represents, I don't know, a portal. Yeah, we're going to get your own customer portal, and that's, you're going to get that. And then a later release might include something around, I don't know, AI, because it's the hot topic right now. But
Exactly.
do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Some sort of way of visualizing it that way, so it's not
mm.
just a few lines saying version 1.3 or a random feature name, but what does that actually mean for the customer's perspective?
Yeah, exactly. And imagine if you have some sort of roadmap like that, preferably hand drawn, compared to a chart or anything like that. And then you can connect that to a story map and go with that roadmap and compare it to your story map and really get into detail. Like this is where we're currently at, and this is where we're going, and this is the function that we're talking about, and so on and so on. So I'd love to see that as well.
Yeah, me too. I also, as I mentioned, I'd love the idea of seeing more contracts written in, or construed in visual formats.
Mm.
I'd love to see. I think sprint planning could do with a bit of a visual injection.
Mm.
So I'm trying to think of ways to bring a bit of life to that, because that does seem very formulaic and repetitive. Indeed, backlog refinement. I've been
Mm.
experimenting, or sharing ideas for, doing like a Tinder style backlog refinement where you swipe
Ah,
left and swipe right on things.
yeah.
Swipe left means, this is not a priority right now, whereas right means, yep, it needs to be in there. And super light means it needs to be top of the backlog, right? It needs to
Mm.
be right there because that's the top priority. And
Yeah.
just using that visual method of a
Mm.
simple sorting process for
Yeah.
backlog refinement can just energize things a little bit more than just
Yeah.
some of the way the backlog refinement is commonly done.
Yeah. And actually, the tools that we're using, many of us are using currently, are, where they're developing quite good things recently. For instance, you can connect Jira to Miro and get your, or if you want to do something like that you're describing, then you can just with some sort of app, download all the stories and connect that to Jira, and you can play around with that and maybe add some visuals or so. And maybe just draw people out of that. Because you tend to go to your system like Jira or whatever, and then you sit there in a remote meeting and people sort of zoom out, as you say.
Yeah.
Mm.
They lose focus. They start thinking about what's for lunch, or what my next meeting's going to be, or
Yeah.
start multitasking on other things because they've got a
Mm.
hundred emails coming through, or that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
a huge believer in trying to energize things. I do believe visuals are a great way of doing so. So Elena, let's get out our crystal ball and take a glance
Mm.
into the future. How do you think visual thinking will evolve in the workplace, and what trends or new things should we be aware of that we could perhaps look forward to in that space?
Well, I do think that the interest the interest is so people are so curious about this, and I think that it's just starting to get sort of accepted to play a little bit with in the workplace, and I think that that will certainly it will certainly be more available further on when if we could get perhaps more managers and more senior management to accept like that this is a really cool tool, this is a really useful tool, it's okay. And if we could be able to use physical walls in the workspace and so on, I really think that people will continue to experiment with the stuff and uh, throw things up on the wall and work more with to a greater extent really than what we do today. We might have a story map, or we might have a Kanban board or whatever on the physical walls in your office space, but I think we can certainly expand that. And it will be interesting to see, as you started talking about, how can AI help us with that. Although I'm a little bit, I can't, I can't, I do have a little bit like, isn't that a little bit of a cheating to get AI to draw for you? Because I really want people to draw for themselves. I want them to draw and pick up a pen in their hand and draw something by themselves because of the release of endorphins and so on, and the effect that that gives them. But as inspiration, yeah, sure. Um, but I think that people will be, it will just get more accepted than it is today, basically.
I'm absolutely seeing a rise in acceptance and demand for this sort of thing. You see more and more agile coaches learning these sorts of skills and kind of sharing those skills with others,
Yeah.
using them in their trainings, their workshops, in the delivery of their talks and presentations. I
Mm.
almost feel like there's multiple routes that could happen here. You could either see people starting to become visual coaches where they go in and teach other companies how to become more visual.
Yeah.
You could see existing agile coaches building the visual coaching side into part of their toolkit, and
Yeah.
it just becoming part and parcel of how the modern agile coach works.
Mm.
So I see that as a potential in the future. And on the AI side, that is such a crazy advancement. We
Mm.
are we're really not far away from you and I being in this meeting right now, and
Mm.
immediately afterwards there being a summary transcript in words that you could then very quickly convert into a bit of a visual story on a template. I don't
Yeah.
think we're that far away from you typing into ChatGPT, for example, I would like a
Mm.
workshop on this topic, and then
Yeah.
it building a Miro template of that workshop for you that you
Mm.
can then just use.
Yeah.
It's crazy how far it's advancing, and I
Yeah.
get your concern about the it not feeling as tangible and it not feeling
Mm.
as personally owned. But
Mm.
if used as a medium for learning information and knowledge retention and
Inspiration.
time saving, because I think
Mm.
the concern is just like meeting minutes, right? Nobody wants to sit down and record and write up meeting minutes. It's a very
Mm.
admin heavy, time intensive job to do.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had something that took that burden off of you and
Mm.
converted some of those bits of text into visuals, even if they're simplistic iconography style visuals,
Mm.
would be a good starting point. And then obviously using the great skills of people like yourselves, you could then weave that into a much nicer narrative.
Mm.
So I'm very interested to see how that continues.
Yeah.
Right, folks, our time draws near. Now, Olina, how can our listeners learn more about you and your work as the Visual Agile Coach?
I would say go to my LinkedIn page. I have a couple of upcoming workshops, a couple of upcoming conferences that I will attend as well. And just connect with me. I'm happy to answer any questions or chat or whatever. So I would say go to LinkedIn and connect with me.
All right, so thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to our future conversations and seeing more of your journey. I dare say I'll catch you at another one of those conferences in the near future. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the show, folks, to keep up to date with the latest episodes as they land. And as always, don't stop believing. Thanks, Olina.
Thanks.